There had to be global issues that the people of the globe could be made concerned about. And then they could go in and fix those global issues. But that process would be bringing in globalism and world government. Very simple strategy, and I agree with them all the way back to the 50s. They were correct. You will not get a global government unless you identify issues, problem, reaction, solution. They knew that. They were correct. You know what they identified effectively? And it's as early as the late 50s, climate change was identified as an opportunity. Greetings all, and today I have a special for you, a 2-hour-long Joe Rogan style podcast, long form discussion, and it's with Dr. Ahmed Malik, and we go through everything of importance in geopolitics, the state of the world, and he, like I, views the world as it is, not as we'd like to see it. And he has lost his job effectively as a surgeon and doctor in the UK because he's spoken out on things. In fact, one hospital dropped him from the register because of an Instagram post he did that was less than positive about some trans stuff. So there you go. But he stands up for truth in science and reality, geopolitically, as do I. So this discussion is long format, but we cover absolutely everything. So just sit back and enjoy. And also I discussed with him physical gold, and he is very well aware. And now he's also linked up with Pure Gold Company in the UK. So the links are down below for free, independent financial type advice with one of their assistants, if you wish, etc. So anyway, here we go. Long format time.
So the funny thing is, like, people always say Glaswegians speak fast and they've got the gift of the gab, but you Irish people, man, it's like a machine gun. And I'm like, just before I pressed the record button, I was like, save it for the camera.
I know. Well, at least I'm understandable relative. Like, a lot of Irish accents are shocking, and they're even faster. 30 years in corporate, I had to deal with Singaporeans, Puerto Ricans, Americans, the whole lot. So I slowly got more clear, I think.
30 years. I'm clear. I freaking love it.
33 is the classic. 33. No H's in Ireland. No 33. No.
Dude, I love your accent. And I love you, even though it's taken me fracking ages to get you on, you piece of shit. Man, have you made me work for this?
I'm a C word. I won't say the word. It's very popular in Ireland, though. It's not seen as particularly bad, that word, traditionally.
Do you want to hear something really funny about that C word before we talk about some other stuff? So I was chatting to Ed Dowd, and geez, man, he was very serious during the podcast. And I'm trying to crack a joke. He's very serious, man. He's very serious. And I'm trying to crack a joke here and there. And when we stopped recording, he goes, I think I was too serious. And I was like, you're just a little bit stiff. And he goes, you know, my mates actually tell me I'm quite funny. And I'm like, okay, good. Glad to hear that. He goes, no, I'm quite a funny, relaxed, chilled out guy. I went, well, maybe just drop that persona a little bit when you're on the camera. He went, yeah, you're right. And he goes, you know what? I've also discovered a really special word. And I went, what's that? He went, the C word. He went, it's a fantastic word. It describes all the men out there who are weak and evil and pathetic. Can I say it? I went, yeah. I'm not recording, mate. And he said it out loud. I went, how did that feel? He went, it felt so good. And then Ed Dowd went on and said it like 4 or 5 more times.
Excellent. Yeah, it's perceived in particularly America, I think it's, it's misogynistic, it's blah, blah, blah. But in Ireland, it nearly always refers to a man, a bad man. So it's not really, it's lost the misogynism association completely. Like, or a bunch of C's is just a common phrase. But lately, political correctness, wokeness, everything's getting stupid, but yeah.
Ed Dad, if you're listening.
Actually,
just keep saying that word. And he made it very clear, Ivor. He was like, this is to describe all the pathetic, evil men out there. He goes, the problem in this world is we don't have enough strong, brave, courageous men. We're in a time of weak, evil men, pathetic, you know?
We're in the age of cowardice, there's no doubt. And I said this long before COVID, but COVID just showed it up so clearly. We're 3 generations since World War II. The real men have largely faded. And of course, we know from very high up the chain, with no conspiracy theory, we know they've been funding massively the trans, the wokeness and all that stuff. And they're trying to soften and undermine society. No conspiracy theory. That's what I would do in my corporate buddies if we were involved in that. You have to weaken and soften society and take away traditions, nationalism, sovereignty. You have to slowly strip away all the bonds that hold people together. And then you can do what you want with them. And that's what they want. They want to do what they want with them.
Man,
if they get away with it.
That's a clip. That's a short clip just there. I mean, I've looked into this. You know, I don't know if you've heard of the Tavistock Institute. I'm telling you, mate. Right? A lot of this is coming from there, and you just need to look at who's funding the Tavistock, and all this gender business is coming out of there. And the funny thing is, they got into trouble as well. They had to shut down. Now, what I want to say to you is, when this place got shut down, because people only shut something down if they're doing something wrong, and if they're doing something wrong, you would think heads would roll, and if there's doctors involved, you would think doctors would get into trouble and be up to the GMC and being investigated. Nuh-uh. No doctor was held responsible. No doctor went in front of the GMC. And guess what? The Tavistock reopened. Just another little name, just another little branding configuration, and they're doing the same old shit again. So what? I got upset because, once I looked at COVID, Ivor, I was like, there's so many scams and hoaxes out there. And one of this is transgender ideology. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm going to say it clearly. A man is a man. A woman is a woman. Everything else is bullshit. Okay? You're distorting truth and reality. And I'm sorry. I'm not going to pussyfoot around this and go, oh, no, maybe. Look, these are vulnerable people. They've got mental illnesses, and that mental illness is there for lots of reasons. The shitty food, the environment, lockdowns, our education system, the indoctrination, the cost of living, everything. So many things. The breakdown of society, the family unit. So we've got a generation of messed up kids who are being told that, you know what, you're in the wrong body. And the medical industrial complex is taking advantage of them, making them lifelong pharma patients, mutilating them biologically and physically with surgery. And I'm sorry, as a doctor with medical ethics in my core, I want to speak up for these people. I'm not transphobic. I'm saying we need to protect them and defend them. But apparently someone like me now is dangerous, is transphobic, which is so ridiculous. I have no phobia of people like that at all.
It's just so absurd and so clearly self-evidently absurd. It's frustrating, like COVID. I mean, I was looking in April, and I have 30 years of complex problem solving, and I had the advantage of a huge network of experts in all fields, and I grew it rapidly within weeks. So I had a huge advantage, but it was so obviously absurd. From Diamond Princess, February 2020, this is the same thing. It's self-evidently absurd, but it shows you the power of propaganda over decades can lead normal people to just be completely blind to patent absurdity. And just one thing I'll say on that, not to get mired in it, but the other day I knew the WEF, because I always said to people a simple thing. Look at the WEF timeline on their Twitter account. Anything they're pushing is corrupt. I have not yet found from climate to COVID to trans, anything they're pushing is corrupt. So if you want to know what's corrupt in the world and what's the narrative and propaganda, easiest thing in the world, go to @WEF on Twitter, look down the timeline with a notepad. You got the full list. You don't need to go anywhere else. Any other corruption in the world and propaganda and programs of madness that are not on that timeline, they're small stuff. And that's it. And I found out the other day that in 2019, they had a huge forum thing, and a lady came on in an absurd outfit that went with the whole trans LGBTQ plus 17, 18. And she said clearly, and I looked up the website, the WEF now is pretty much in a big way getting into LGBTQA whatever. And it's a big program and we're going all over the world. We're working with media. We're working with activist groups. We're blah, 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 blah. And it's on their website. I put the link when I shared it. So they literally in 19 got into LGBT trans in a big way. And they boasted about it. Why? World Economic Forum. What's the answer? Same as everything else. They need to weaken society to achieve all their other real goals. It's self-evident. Mass migration is the exact same policy, and they've pretty much almost admitted it. It's to take away nationality and nationalism because they want the superstate. It's just self-evident, and it's actually a very simple strategy. It's not even like conspiracy theories are usually all complicated and hidden. They're saying it. It's obvious. But the media, this is the killer. The media will never, ever even discuss that idea.
Never. And you know what? People like you and me will never be invited to any media platform, any panel, because our views are not acceptable. They'll have an Overton window and they'll say, we have open debate. And they have people basically who are all saying the same shit in a tiny little confine. You know, throw someone like you and me in, and like you said off air, we're just too hot. We're too hot. And the reason why is, mate, we're uncaptured. We are raw. We are uncaptured. We are unfiltered. You know, we are uncensored. We're just going for the truth. And you know what? I'm sure you've put your hands up and said, oh, I got this one wrong. But you know what? But we only got it wrong because we're human, not because we're deliberately trying to mislead people. Like, because I'm not perfect. I'll get everything right. I'm sure you're the same. But, you know, they don't want people like you and me having that platform. But, you know, what you were saying about breaking down society and nation and statehood, everything. 100% right. The family unit, like they don't want strong men defending their families, right? And a lot of women have come up to me and said, where are all the men? I mean, it's shocking how many women come up to me and go, where are the men? And I'm telling you, it's a problem. And then you're right. Yeah. Like you break down the nationhood state. Like it is not racist to say what the frack is going on with this mass migration business. Like it's something weird going on. Like where's the money coming from? Like forget the UK for a second. Like the southern border of the States. Like the people that are crossing there aren't coming from South America or Mexico. The Mexicans are quite happy in Mexico, actually. These are people from Chad. These are people from Afghanistan. How did a guy from Afghanistan get all the way to the southern border in Mexico to the US? Like, that's a serious logistical effort there. And it's not just one or two. It's a lot. Now, if you just set up a company tomorrow and said, right, from a logistics point of view, we want you to transport, 100,000 people, 1 million people halfway across the world, that's a major feat of logistics and money. It's a proper operation. What the frack is going on? And then, remember like overnight, we suddenly got these fast boats coming across the channel. Where did that come from? What's happening?
Well, I think the NGOs are one of our major issues, obviously, beyond the paymasters at the top, the UN, WEF, WHO, and all those, and Rockefeller Institute or Foundation. I mean, they're the head of the snake, if you want to call it that. But the NGOs, they have created massive armies of useful idiots who actually believe their own BS and think they're doing a good thing. And those NGOs in Ireland alone, the amount of our tax money being fed to NGOs to actually create a dystopia for us, we're paying for it ourselves. Billions of euro in a small country like Ireland is flooding out of the government to myriad NGOs. And they, in turn, are lobbying the government quietly. For instance, the LGBTQ or trans, there was a group in Ireland promoting Tavistock and trans. And there was a leaked document from their internal email to their members. And they specifically said, we have seen in England that when this becomes a public discussion, it goes against us. So in Ireland, it's very important to deal directly with teachers' unions, directly with government people, but do not have open discussions with the citizens. It doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work, and I think you touched on it, or we both did, they actually know deep down that people will wise up if there's open discussion.
Yes.
And they know their cart and horse is nonsense. deep down, subconsciously, they know it's nonsense, but they want it, they believe in it. So they actually instructed their members. And it reminded me in America, back in the 40s or 50s, the communist movement in America, and then you had the whole McCarthy era.
Yeah.
I thought they went crazy against communisms, but in retrospect now, I actually understand McCarthy better. But anyway.
Me too.
I mean, the last 3 years, I have to reassess a lot of shit.
Yes.
But the thing was that there was equally a leak, and one of the top people in the communist movement, and they were moving and working like the NGOs are today to bring in a form of communism to America. Slowly, surely, long game, ideologically driven, very motivated, very structured. But the release was that this guy had told all the communist members in private kind of communication, anyone who's against us, i.e. freedom-loving American types, always take the opportunity, if possible, to call them fascists. And he said that, be careful, don't do it if it could blow back, but any opportunity, always call them fascists and keep repeating. Because he said that is the dirtiest word. It's got massive power against our opponents. And if you keep repeating it, it'll just stick.
Yeah.
With a bit of time, it'll just stick. Public will perceive that person kind of as the F word. And that was very clever. And that he was very correct. And we're seeing the exact same games today. Far right, anti-vax. It's as old as humanity.
It is. You're 100% right. It's really funny you should say that about the McCarthyism. I used to think, man, those witch hunts, they were just excuse to get people that were political opponents. No. I mean, who's that guy in the 80s, in 1984, this Russian guy, this defector, Rezanov or something, I can't remember what his name was, but
Yuri, I think it was Rezanov. Fascinating. He told them in interviews, mainstream.
He said, we're infiltrating, and we're going to corrupt your society. We're going to make you feel hopeless and helpless and destroy your soul and willpower and take over. Holy macaroni. If that's not happening, I don't know what is. And, I wish I could have my mum join in. Do you know why I want my mum to join in right now? She's actually in my house. I'm in the garden studio. She's had a heart attack. She's jabbed. I'm looking after her. She's had heart failure. It's been a shit time over Christmas. But, the reason why I would love to drag her out and bring here is, yesterday she was saying to me, I'm not happy. I went, why? She goes, all these asylum seekers and immigrants, coming over. I've seen them in the mosque and they're bragging to me. I went, what do you mean? She goes, these are people who've got big mansions back home in Pakistan. They come over here. They claim asylum. The government gives them £1,500 rent a month. She goes, I don't get any rent. I don't get anything. They get their council tax paid off. She goes, I'm paying over $1,000 for council tax. I'm a retired pensioner. She goes, there's nothing, problematic back home for them. And they come here and they get their benefits and they get everything. And then they work in the black market. They don't pay their taxes. And she goes, I came over when I was an 18-year-old with your dad. We worked every single day of our lives. We never got any benefits. We paid our taxes. And even now I'm paying. And these people are just coming over pretending like they've got problems. And our money, she goes, my money is going to pay for their quality of life. She goes, this is a joke. Now, if someone wants to say my 72-year-old mother is a racist, she's not.
Yeah.
She's not.
Well, I know, but I've heard the same. Lots of people of huge diversity are saying the same thing because they came, worked hard, and are looking around at a lot of grifting and are saying, what's happening? Because now this is their country. They're working hard. They probably got a big mortgage, all the other, maybe two people working, and they're looking at all the floods coming in and wondering why. And the killer thing is, again, it's so the opposite of conspiracy theory. Yet the average normie would think it sounds like conspiracy theory. So I forget the name, but there's an Irish guy, head of Goldman Sachs, back in 2005, 2010. Of course, Goldman Sachs straight into the UN and a senior position. And his big thing was migration. And 2009 or maybe 11, he's dead now. Was it Robinson? No, it's not. An absolute thug. And he went out with a big address that was quite famous within UN circles, and he gave a big address around mass migration. And he said it. He said we need to basically destroy this nationalism thing in the countries in Europe for a European superstate. And the bigger picture is the US State Department for a world of superstate is the real thing. But within Europe, they're doing their bit. And he said the quiet part out loud, comfortably. And the method was, of course, to flood the zone. You flood the zone, and this national identity will fade and weaken, and that's what we need. And he just said it. And everyone nodded. Yeah, because European superstate, we all want it because we're all UN, we're all EU, we're the people at the top. That's what we want. And you're right. And originally it was the Kalergi plan in the 20s with the Pan-European Union, the very early days where they wanted a European superstate. And they identified that mass migration into the zone of very different people would enable it's a straight, simple strategy, but they're the ultimate racists. And I always say this because the likes of the Goldman Sachs guy, the Rockefellers and all the rest are super rich white guys who will never be affected by the problems, will never care who pays for it because the little guy pays with tax. And they're the ultimate racists themselves because they are literally treating people, often poor people, as pawns, like cattle, to get geopolitical goals for their own enrichment.
Yeah.
It doesn't get more racist than the people who are driving the policies. But they accuse everyone else of being racist, of course.
Absolutely. It's funny. I think it's funny you've touched upon geopolitics now. It's funny. I love these open conversations, see where they go. But I had Horovje Moric on my podcast, and it's going to come out in a few weeks' time talking about geopolitics. And it's really relevant. And if you look back at history, there's been two types of things that go on. You've either got one group of people invading another people and displacing them or annihilating them. And it's happened quite recently. You just need to look at North America and what happened to the Native Americans. You know, they're happily living a nomadic lifestyle, fighting amongst themselves. And then suddenly all these ships arrive and then boom, their bisons are gone and they're stuck in little reservations, ghettos. Or what you had is you had waves
gambling
of
and booze.
Yeah, exactly. High carb diet. Or you basically
50% diabetic.
50%. There you go. Bloody hell. Or you've had waves of immigration and you've had assimilation, and that's been really quite good for societies where actually the new waves of immigration bring in new knowledge, new skills, new talents, new drive, and the tapestry of the nation, you know, actually gets richer. And actually, if you look at the UK, we're a total mongrel nation. But it's small waves, and the people are coming, are working, and they want to become part of the state. Like my mum and dad would sit down to us and say, "You're British, you're Scottish. You know, I can barely speak Urdu. I can't read or write it. But their focus was English, your culture. This is it. You know, and this is my home. And that's what they were doing. And what we're seeing now isn't that. What we're seeing is waves of people coming over, very young people, male predominantly, and they want to bring over Sharia law or they want to bring in their own customs. And it's like, hold on, if it's so bad where you were and you want this, why don't you just stay where you are? You know, just you've come here purely to adopt this country and the values that are here, not to bring in other things. And so I get really concerned about what's actually happening. I don't think it's racist to talk about it. I think it's very alarming. The scale of it is just, and the fact that we're not hearing about it in the news or by the politicians, and it seems to be a Western civilization issue. And I don't know what the agenda is, but it's a bit weird as far as I'm concerned. And it's like,
well, yeah, but maybe I'm being oversimplistic here, but the agenda to me is simply self-evident, and it's not like there's a million reasons. There's one reason, the one I went through. There's no question. It goes back nearly 100 years to the Pan-European movement, and it's been persisted with on and off. But in the last few decades, and particularly since COVID and Ukraine, it's exploded. But it's always been the same reason. There's an understanding with the really smart guys, and they are really smart, they're corporate guys at the top. They know that the best way to undermine society and break nationalism and sovereignty, you have a bunch of red-haired Irish in one country and then you have blue-eyed Swedes in another. They'll never sign up for some big, happy European, smorgasbord superstate.
Yeah.
Instinctively, they won't. They got their own thing. And their own thing is the definition of diversity. Here's another irony. Just like the guys driving the policy are the most racist, that's ironic. Here's another irony. You like diversity, we all do. And we like the managed migration of UK 30, 40 years ago. They had proper bureaucracies and things were managed. And there were hard workers coming and they strove to get to the UK in a good way. And then they contributed. That was all great. But the really big second irony is, what's more diverse and lovely than all these different countries with their own customs and their own languages and their own histories and richness? And you can go to another country like France and hear the language and you can see their history and they have different ways of thinking about things, very interesting. And then you can come home and talk about it and multiply that by all the different countries. That's massive diversity. Now, what if you have a strategy of destroying that and making all the countries into one blob?
Yeah.
You've destroyed diversity. Where diversity is gone. Oh my God. We've just spent decades actually eliminating diversity because now across all of Europe and America too, we're all watching the same junk television and society is just one big blob now. There's no diversity anymore. And that's what they want. Diversity is dangerous to people who want superstates.
Mate, you've nailed it. You've absolutely nailed it. And if you look at all the countries when you go on holiday, there used to be a time, I'm old enough to remember it, the things were really different. Now you go to a shopping mall anywhere in Europe, in the Middle East, it's the same shops, it's the same brands. And it's like, I don't want this. I want to go somewhere different and find unique shops and boutiques and different foods and different tastes and flavors. And you're not getting it. Everything is this, every high street, you go down a German high street, a Brussels high street, a French high street, anywhere, in Rome, they're all the same. And it's like, I don't want this. Globalization is happening. And the thing is like, there's a really famous guy who wanted a European, mega state, super state. His name was Hitler. He wanted that,
Good point.
And then the thing is like, and even the EU is really an American project, but what they want is they want 7 or 8 of these big blocks, the Asian bloc, the African Union, the Pacific, the whatever. And then, if you think about it, if the EU and everything, if you've got these like 6, 7 kind of like super blocks, eventually then they'll say, hey, why don't we just have one block? And then that's a one world government. And I know it's a conspiracy theory, but people need to get this. This is the agenda. They keep talking about it. One health, one this, one that. They want a one world government. Because guess what? It's just going to be so much easier for them.
Yeah. Of course. And the problem is, as I say, it's frustrating. It's so self-evident and obvious. I mean, I spent a career in complex problem solving that makes this stuff look like, Ladybird book. It's so self-evident. You just look at the data. You look at the evidence of the last 100 years. You followed the trail, like in problem solving. You followed the trail of cause and effect sequence, which you can apply to geopolitics, you can apply it to macroeconomics, you can apply it to complex technical physics problems. It's all the same. You can apply it to psychology. I've applied complex problem solving to all of my staff in a sense over the last decade and a half. It's the same process of logic and comparative analysis and probabilistic inference. It's the same thing. But back to your point, this one is self-evident. I mentioned some of the key points, like going back to Pan-European Union, but it's just self-evident of where it's going. And it also makes absolute sense. For all of human history, this has happened in cycles, in super cycles. From the Roman Empire, Shaka Zulu in Africa, you hit the National Socialism thing. always you get bad ideological, highly driven, generally sociopathic people rise in the good times. And when they get to the top and they have enough control, they tend to strike. COVID was an example of a strike. And we're just going through the same thing. Not only is it not a conspiracy theory, all we're doing is repeating the natural history of humanity. It's self-evident. We're just seeing the move towards totalitarianism. It's happened again and again before, and it'll happen again. And the danger now, I would mention, maybe it's worth talking about briefly, is technology is making this cycle a little more dangerous, because the previous things collapsed when people talked to each other, and eventually the anger got big enough and the awareness got big enough that people pushed back, and then there were coups and overturnings, yada yada, and wars. But this time, there's a couple of big differences. A war won't really save us with the good guys winning for freedom and democracy, because unfortunately there's no one to fight with. All the countries now report up to the EU and the UN and the State Department and the
including
WEF.
Russia and China. The idea that they're all just jostling for the power positions. They all want the same thing, and they're all just jostling. Like Russia and China are saying, we're not going to be subservient. We're going to be equal partners in this. This is all that's going on.
Equal. That's exactly it. Ukraine and all, and it's just nonsense, because at the end of the day, Putin on the top level and Xi Jinping, they're on the blower to the other boys at the top of our side, right?
Yeah,
it's a big chess game, and they don't want someone to lose.
Yeah.
They don't want someone to lose. They want to all play the chess game, and they each have fiefdoms, new feudalism. China has its own fiefdom. We pretend that we're all fighting each other and there's all this stuff for the little people, but the reality is they're on the blower, and they all want the same thing. And China wants its sector. China has its slice of the pie, the global pie. The Western globalists have their slice, and they agree not to cause anything too difficult with China, off the record. Putin's there. He's got his own fiefdom, his own ant farm. It's under good control. So they're playing politics. But at the end of the day, they're never going to get in a hot nuclear war, right? Because it's not in their interest. So they all just want their big slice, and they're happy with their big fiefdoms. That's it.
That's it. You nailed it. And the worrying thing is, in the past, Ivor, you had these immigrants because they were fleeing. They're fleeing the tyrannical regimes. They're fleeing when you had, people debasing the currency. So the Irish, when they were kicked out of their land with the potato famine, the Scottish crofters by the landowners, because they were tyrants, they went to America. They went, well, frack you. We'll go somewhere where we can work hard and make. I mean, people don't leave because they've got a good job and a stable. I mean, they went out to the Wild West for a party time, for a good time? No, because they were desperate. These were desperate people fleeing persecution. But there was at least somewhere you could run away to. Dude, I've looked at the map. I don't know where I would go now. Like, the whole place is a shit show. I mean, we've got globalization shit show going on. Everywhere is captured. There's nowhere to run to. And we need to sort out our own shit here in our backyards everywhere, because we're in trouble. And you know what? About the technology thing, I don't know. It's gonna go either way, because with technology, everything happens so fast. Everything's happening fast. And either, I think they're going to get what they want, by the way. I think they're going to get this one world government business, whatever. And it's either going to collapse very quickly and fall apart because it's just bullshit and it's a crap idea led by idiots, or we're in trouble and it's going to last a very long time. Very long time. I don't know.
I always say to people ask, and I don't like to be negative. I mean, I'm such a straight up person, and it's been great for me because people appreciate that. I always tell the truth. To your earlier point, I look back on COVID, and actually I was 90% right, 10% maybe not correct, but to be honest, the 10% is zero, because we're all dealing with emerging data and we're hypothesizing based on a complex situation. So if you get 90-10 right, you're the guy, and the whole network, not just me, my whole network I checked against all the time. The narrative side, were unsurprisingly 90-10 wrong. That's it. It's over. There's no point even talking about what you got wrong. It's literally irrelevant. But we were talking about the positive message. I think like Dr. Jakob Nordengard, I learned a lot from about the Rockefellers and where all this came from. I'm cautiously, guardedly optimistic. I believe we're on the razor's edge like never before, or not since World War II, and it's all to play for. I can't call it. You're right. I can't call it, but I do think it's in the balance, which is very important because there's everything to fight for, everything to be motivated to fight for. They are racing to cut us off at the pass. And there's an element of desperation. Rushing in hate speech laws, they failed in Ireland, caused a furore. That was a great thing to see happen. They're rushing in as many migrants as they can get in before people push back. In Ireland, it's slowed down because people are pushing back. And 76% in an official Irish Times Red Sea poll said the immigration has to slow down and get controlled. 76% in a poll, and the government's still ramming it through. That means they don't give a damn about their electorate.
Of course they don't.
There's a lot of green shoots, and they are racing to cut us off at the pass with an element of desperation, which I like to see. And we are racing to counter the censorship laws and all of their madness. And I just think it's all to play for. But calling it, I mean, at this point, it's hard to call it.
I'm happy to change my mind and stay positive and optimistic. I'm fighting for a reason, even if I think it is a terrible thing and they get what they want. I'm hoping that it'll only be a couple of years and the whole thing will explode in their faces. You know, we need to fight. We need to fight, and we don't give up. I mean, can I just ask you something? You've mentioned Rockefeller and this and that a few times, and I'm like you, right? I think this has all been in the planning. It's all being engineered, and everything we see is very calculated. And then obviously there's little things that happen and it's just as like a reaction, but there's just definitely been a trend. There's been, not every detail has been planned, but there's an idea, an agenda. There's an agenda that they want executed. But I had someone called Mark Changezi on my podcast, and he was like, nah, not really.
Good.
He was like, not really, Ahmed. This is people. People are the ones. The politicians are reacting to the mob mentality. And, Boris Johnson didn't even want to do anything, and he did it just because the people wanted lockdowns and that. Oh. I'm not really on that page. What do you think?
Yeah, Mark's a great guy, and I remember his name, and he did great analysis and work and all. But there's quite a few like him that they really need to see. Maybe my talk from Southampton a month or two ago, I went over and did 2 talks, and in Bournemouth, and it's an updated version of Dr. Nordengard's main talk about the Rockefellers. And once you watch that 40-minute talk, even Mark, he'll drop all that talk. He'll drop it. I am sure of it. I'd be amazed if Mark watched that 40 minutes and came away and still maintained what he said. And again, this is not a criticism. I just think he's...
Distill it. Distill that 40 minutes in 4 minutes. Tell me.
Okay. I'll distill
pressure.
it.
No pressure.
See, everything is about, for me, is about evidence. I'm an absolute slave to reality or realpolitik. So I would say this, but I'm saying it and it's true, right? I am the opposite of conspiracy theorist because I demand proof on everything. Whether it's proof in terms of numbers or scientific direct proof, or whether it's proof in the sense that Sherlock Holmes or whatever would accept it as a form of proof. The Rockefeller story is perfect because everything is published. Everything Dr. Nordengard refers to is published. He never goes into anything like me where it's an idea and it might be completely wrong, because you don't do that. He did a PhD in it in 2012 on Rockefeller's influence in the world. And he defended the PhD successfully, even though Rockefeller people late in the day came and tried to stop the university allowing the PhD to go ahead, which just proved his point.
Wow.
Yeah, which just proved his point. So, and someone joked to him, Jakob, you're doing a PhD on the influence of the Rockefellers, and this university is kind of substantially funded by Rockefeller because a lot of them are. But anyway, here it is. The John D. Rockefeller was an absolute scumbag. No one would argue with that. 1920s, the oil baron, we had all of the documented cartoons in the main newspapers. One of them shows him with the Congress of the US and the Houses of Parliament, etc., in his palm, and he's moving them around with his finger, and it's Rockefeller controlling the government. That's from like 1915 or something. That's not contestable. It got so bad that the public opinion went against him because he was an absolute sociopath and he was destroying everything. And he got blowback. And the press at that time went against him. And then there was an incident at one of his mines where he basically would have given the nod, and they ended up sending in militias and they machine gunned men, women and children. There were a load of people killed. And that was too much. So he got huge blowback. And long story short, what he basically did was, what'll I do? He got a PR agency, quite a famous guy, who had, by the way, been caught doing huge work for Hitler's National Socialist movement in the 30s. So that was in the newspapers too. So that's the kind of guy. And that guy told him, John, you can't lie. Because if you lie, the media will talk about it. The people will know that you lied. Now, of course, for John D. Rockefeller, this was anathema. I can't lie. But the guy had the solution. He said, you're going to have to purchase some substantial chunks of media. And then you can say what you want and it won't be a lie because the media will say it's true. He said, truth is subjective. And he did. He bought Time Life, I think, and a bunch more and started getting them to put out articles. And it worked. Bill Gates famously, I believe, modeled his rebirth in early 2000s on Rockefeller. He put the jumper on and he got a lot of training. Same thing. Very close to Rockefeller's. Bill Gates' father was a Rockefeller senior counselor or something. And he was in the club and he was in the Council of Foreign Relations. All these guys are together. They all have their clubs.
Yeah,
Bill might have even been brought in as
it's not like Bill Gates had no money and in his garage suddenly invented something. He had significant backing. All these people have significant money and backing. I think his dad even worked for IBM and he got some special, I don't know, I might be wrong. But like they've all got
his father was in some his father was in a notorious club, the family planning one in America.
Yes.
Family something or other that wants abortion and population. His father was in that club.
Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
His father was buddies with the head of IBM. And guess what? IBM just happened to give Little Billy the huge contract with outrageous terms that propelled him to stardom. I won't believe a word of the Bill Gates story. I would guess, I can't prove this, given the evidence, I would guess he was identified as a very useful person, as their person for the internet computer age. Place him, just like they placed Morris Strong was believe he was a homosexual worker on a Rockefeller oil rig in Canada. Who was Morris Strong? Rockefeller's got him sent to the UN, gave him a job as a security manager or something. Within a couple of years, he was head of the environmental side of the UN. This is how you do it. You just place your assets and then just work in the background. So I'm jumping ahead. So very quickly, that's John D., but that's not the story. He had 5 sons. The 5 sons were instructed in the goal of the family, the richest family in America. And the goal was not to be richer. The goal was not to have more yachts. He instructed them and indoctrinated them that Rockefeller's destiny is to create internationalism, is to create a one-world government where the rich elites can have complete free trade, unhindered, and they just have armies of workers. That's their destiny. And in fairness, Rogan said, they believe it. They don't think they're evil. They believe it is their destiny for the elite to manage the world because politicians and people clearly are too stupid. They believe that. So the Rockefellers set up the Special Brothers Project in 1956 or 7. They moved fast. They started funding activist groups. They brought in Henry Kissinger. They identified him in Harvard as a really useful sociopath. And we know what they did with Kissinger and how big he became. People know him. Kissinger was brought in as their main agent. The Harvard Club at the time was funded to bring together all the best thinkers in the world and the senior elites and politicians. and they started putting out their proposals. And to summarize their proposals most simply, they had identified global issues as the only way to get through globalism. There had to be global issues that the people of the globe could be made concerned about. And then they could go in and fix those global issues. But that process would be bringing in globalism and world government. Very simple strategy, and I agree with them all the way back to the 50s. They were correct. You will not get a global government unless you identify issues, problem, reaction, solution. They knew that. They were correct. You know what they identified effectively? And it's as early as the late 50s, climate change was identified as an opportunity. They identified pandemics and health concerns, global ones. They had to be global. Climate disaster of whatever sort works. Financial disasters were a great opportunity because the small people all panic and you can bring in anything you want and move more money to you. And the fourth one was
global
terrorism.
Global terrorism.
Global terrorism. Now, did they sound familiar after the last, not the last 3 years, but 9/11, blah, 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 blah. They brought in the Patriot Act, yada. It's self-evident. They identified those back. In criminology, you look for means, method, motive, to prove a crime. You do the same thing here. The whole history I won't go through, but they basically arranged to set up the Club of Rome, which is the elites think tank to drive climate hysteria. Richest man in Italy, who was a friend of David Rockefeller, funded it. I mean, everywhere you go, Club of Rome, Council for Foreign Relations set up by Rockefeller, a massive hotbed of elites and presidents of America. Everyone was in it. And all they discuss, Bilderberg was set up by the Prince of the Netherlands, whose daughter, a few years later, led the big climate initiative, the new start for Europe. Everywhere, if you draw just a map of the people, they're all together and they're all in all the same clubs that they set up, from Bilderberg, World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, scary Klaus. Klaus was just identified like Kissinger, and he was put as Kissinger's mentor. And then they sent him off to set up the European Management Forum. And then when they got connected with the UN, which is another Rockefeller club, they became the World Economic Forum in the 80s. And then in 2019, they signed a pact and a contract to join with the UN to implement the Agenda 2030 goals. And the WEF will bring in all the money from the corporates to fund the goals, working with the UN. Climate, gender, viruses and health, it's all documented by them. The same list that Rockefeller brainstormed in the 50s, the same list of problem, reaction, solution, scams, the same list exactly is what's in Agenda 2030 now. That's it.
Mate, that was a very eloquent monologue. That was amazing. No, honestly, I mean it. Respect, because I'm always banging on my podcast. The reason why I go on about vaccines, pandemics, COVID, transgender, climate scam is because they're all linked. The money system, the banking system, the fiat system. And it's not because I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy realist. You're a realist. You're dealing with facts. We are not conspiracy theorists. This is conspiracy reality. No. Okay? Welcome. That's what's going on here, folks. Right? I haven't got time for conspiracy theories. Someone said to me recently, "No, why have you not got someone on your show about flat Earth?" I was like, "Frack that, for goodness sake!" You're right. I've got bigger problems to fry here. Right? Don't give me this shit.
Bollocks.
That's all trying to discredit me, trying to bring me down. Look, you cannot mess with the reality of what I'm saying. The climate scam is a scam. There's no evidence for it. The transgender thing is an inversion of truth. There's no such thing as pandemics, deadly pandemics. They can't happen. We didn't have one. It's bullshit. This warp speed. It's bullshit. Anyone who says it's bullshit. Mistakes were made and we can do it better next time. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. And we have to link. And just the way you said, get the map and draw the lines and join. If you don't see the bigger picture, if you don't see the enemy, if you don't see the problem, how are you going to come up with a strategy to cope with it or a solution to it? You can't just have tunnel vision and just see, focus on that one problem there. We need to talk about the whole thing. And the reason why I know you're not controlled in any way or captured in any way is because in the last 5-10 minutes, you beautifully mapped out how everything is linked. But can I ask you something? Oh, by the way, I used to always say as well, they look for a global crisis that requires a global solution. Isn't that funny?
Always.
Isn't it funny? Always. And what's even funnier is that the layperson doesn't go, what? What the hell are you talking about? Like, I don't see a global
problem. There's a simple reason.
The media.
Well, the media is a huge part of it. So swine flu failed because the media began to actually behave like media and said, hold on a minute, no one's dying. What the F? And it blew up. And they learned and they bought tons of media over the following 10 years before COVID. Like, this stuff is not rocket science. I know they're very smart. They're obviously got more money than they can ever need to pull off this nonsense. But at the same time, what they're doing is self-evident and simple. They are simple strategies. I have a corporate manager friend, very senior manager I worked with for many years. At the start of COVID, we were not meant to go to people's houses. And he knew instinctively there's something wrong here. So he came down to my house and he knew that I'd know what the story was. He knows me for long enough that I'm not going to be wrong. I can be wrong when I throw out an idea. But when I say this is the way it is, I am almost never wrong. When I actually know enough to know that I'm right. So he came down and he says, what's the story with this fucking thing?
Fracking.
I told him in three...
Fracking
thing. Frickin' thing.
Fracking
What's
is
the
from
story?
Battlestar.
And he knows
fracking is from Battlestar Galactica. That's why I say fracking.
Oh, I always think of peak oil and oil extraction when I hear that.
No, Battlestar Galactica.
So, right. It's a while back. So he asked me anyway, and it's interesting that he didn't just take what I said as religion, even though he knew I'd be right. He questioned me. So I gave him 3 or 4 bullets. I said, the impact is severe flu equivalent. There's no question about that. Told him about the Diamond Princess. He knows stats. He's been an engineer for 30 years, senior manager in engineering. So he immediately said, give me numbers. Gave him Diamond Princess. He shook his head. Jesus Christ. And then he said, but what about X? And I gave him the answer and why. And he was just feeding me what he was hearing everywhere and from his staff in America. And I just gave him the answers immediately, casually. And he questioned me a little on those because he was having difficulty believing the scam could be that enormous and that stupid.
Yes.
And I answered each of his questions with trivialese. And he shook his head and he said, fracking hell. And then we chatted about other stuff. And I said, look, it'll blow over like swine flu. Of course, I was wrong there. That's what I was wrong about. I assumed early on it would blow over like swine flu. But I didn't know the media was completely gone. I didn't know the WEF had risen so high in the previous 10 years. I didn't know that, in fairness. So off he went. But he immediately knew it was rubbish with just a 2-minute conversation. He knew. He never looked back. And he was right, of course, because it was self-evident. He kind of knew anyway, because he was looking around. He's a super smart guy. And he said, hold on a minute. No one's getting sick. No one's dying. But the television is telling me every day that this is a catastrophe. Right? It cannot be true. Outside of a nursing home or normal flu peak. It can't be true. And he was right. He was right. Of course he was. Stupid. It was clever.
Yes. Clever. We just need to wake people up, my friend. We just need to wake as many people up as possible.
And that's why the censorship, by the way, just one quick point. Sorry, I'm ranting, but one quick point that I had in my head and I didn't say. Starting off, the point I wanted to make was, in the last few months, I've got demonetizations and I've gotten posts taken off LinkedIn, etc. And I watch and I reverse engineer the pattern. What is their most important strategy? Just look to what you're not allowed to say. And right now you can talk about vaccines. You can talk about COVID origins. You can even talk about lockdowns. You can talk about all the stuff that got you banned 2 years ago and you'll get away with it because they actually don't care. That's yesterday's news. What I'm getting banned for now is clear as crystal. Posts on WEF-UN, factual posts pointing out the collusion, and climate. They're the two things. They're the two most important things they can't have people talking about, to your point. Otherwise, more people will be aware and it won't happen. WEF-UN/Rockefeller and climate. That's what's really getting censored. Not flat Earth, obviously, not 5G. They don't care.
They don't give a damn. I mean, the thing is, I got referred to the GMC because apparently I'm transphobic, which is complete bullshit. And then I had
they used that.
Yeah. But the GMC kicked it out. The GMC said there's no fitness to practice issue here. They said there's no. They said we can see why you referred him, but there's nothing really there's nothing. His medical practice is squeaky clean. And then I'm limping along, and another hospital goes, "Oh, but you failed to notify us of a referral, so we're kicking you out because of that." And I'm like, "Hold on 1 second. The other hospital threatened me with a referral. I never saw a referral. I never heard from the GMC. Like, what am I meant to do? Just because someone threatens to complain about me, I'm meant to go around telling everybody, oh, by the way, someone's going to complain about me. You wait till you see the complaint."
That's wrong.
And the other hospital said, nope, you breached the contract. We're kicking you out anyway. And so that's me kicked out.
Someone got on the phone.
Oh, yeah, mate. Totally. And the funny thing is that second hospital that says you never told us, they were notified by the other hospital of the referral, unlike me. They were copied in with the referral. Not me. In the referral, it says, have you copied in the surgeon? And the box was ticked no. So the other hospital that said, oh, you should have notified me, they knew for 3 months of a referral. Although I suspected one, I had never seen one. They knew of it and then chose not to do anything. But the day after the GMC said, there's nothing we can do here, they went, all right, well, let's find a reason to get him. He never contacted us and told us, but let's use that argument. And then the third hospital, has said, we've had a complaint internally of a post that you did on your Instagram of a short of your podcast, someone talking about Israel and Gaza and Palestine. And we think it can be taken out of context and, it will get rid of trust in you and potentially, offend staff and patients. So we're suspending you and investigating you. And it's like, what the hell? So what it feels like for me, and I'm crippled now financially. I can't work out of hospital. So I've given up. I've stopped now. And the reason why is, I'm fighting it. I'm fighting it legally, and it's expensive and it's time consuming. But the reality is for me right now, it's like, imagine you get in a car, Ivor, right? You get on the road and suddenly you got a police car behind you and in front of you, and they're watching you like a hawk. And there's other drivers, there's other doctors, there's other drivers driving around, speeding, driving recklessly, drunk driver, and they're ignoring them. But you speed 1 mile over the limit, they pull you over, they pull you over, take you to jail, get your fingerprint, and then let you out the next day. And as soon as you're back on the road, 2 police cars again. Now, after a while, it gets very stressful and tiring. And what's happening with me is it's very clear. These hospitals are like those cop cars. They're on my case. They're scrutinizing me all the time. They're looking for any excuse to get me. Do you know what? Maybe I'm giving up, but I just don't want to drive anymore. I just don't want to drive. I know when I'm not welcome. And you know what? I've been down many times before in my past. I'll pick myself up. If it means I'm going to become a professional podcaster and find some way of monetizing it, frack it. All right? But I don't want to get back in the car on the road and just any bullshit excuse to pull me over again. It's getting ridiculous. But, when it comes back to censorship, mate, you're 100% right. You and I, we don't get the platforms. We don't get the invites. We don't get on GB News or Channel 4 or BBC. No one asks for our opinions. I mean, it's funny. I know presenters on GB News. I've asked, can I come on your show and talk about what's happened to me? And this has been the response. And you're just like...
Yeah, trans... They don't want to get in a trans bun fight thing, that kind of crap. They're scared.
Everyone's scared.
That's it. Cowardice too.
But have you? Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the funding of GB News and in Legatum, and some people are saying the Bill and Gates Foundation is behind it as well. I mean, it just gets murky. But
yeah, I'd say what happens, though, to be fair, is GB News starts off honest, and then the bad guys see a threat, and they come with their checkbook. So over time, by all means, dirty money has come in, but that's the strategy. It's the oldest strategy in humanity. You use money. If you see someone who's talking too much truth, you start funding them. And then you threaten the funding will immediately stop and all advertising. That's the stick. So you got the carrot and the stick. This stuff is so, it's frustrating. It's so obvious. These are simple strategies. There's nothing complex in any of this. I'll tell you one that's funny, and I did a video the other day on it. Last year, I had the sheriff's department, the bailiff, called to my door with an order for seizure.
What?
Based on not having paid tax. Yeah. And the funny thing was, in September 2020, one or two Irish celebrities who have been on television, they know how Ireland works, and they've written books, etc. They'd be household names to an extent. Two of them and another person who's a very senior kind of CEO of a large company rang me, and they were in the Irish group, COVID Recovery, and we were producing white papers. We were getting signatures of doctors and professors and sending them by registered mail to all the parliament members. We were working away in a very clean way, very professional, mostly doctors, surgeons in the group, some senior businessmen. And three of them rang me in September when we were producing all these papers, and I was getting on GB News at the time and all. 2020 September, three independently rang me and said to me, Ivor, just checking, are all your tax affairs in order? And you're not getting YouTube revenue, are you? And it's going in your back pocket or stuff. And I said, no, I said, it's all clean. Because years before I set up a company and got a professional, large accountancy firm to do all my tax. Because years before COVID, just because I was involved in the health stuff and questioning statins and quite against the narrative, I actually back then made sure I had an accountancy firm. And I told them, keep everything beyond clean because I've got a public thing. But they told me in September, the Irish way is for the government to use the revenue department to harass you. So that's why they were warning me with your profile now in Ireland. That is the Irish way. They gave me loads of examples in the past. And I told them happily, I'm already in order. And they were delighted. You've got an accountancy firm and they do everything? Yeah.
Same.
Oh, sorry, I was worried. Yeah.
This is why I've got everything, every Substack, everything goes into my bank account and it's there. I haven't even touched it. And I'll get an accountant, we'll do proper tax and everything. No one can freaking
Very important. And they told me that. So I rang my accountant, even though I knew he already was erring on the side of super clean, if that's possible. I rang him and he started laughing on the phone. And I was kind of surprised. And I thought he was going to say, look, no, that's paranoid. And he laughed. He says, oh, don't worry, Ivory. He says, I'm very well aware of that possibility. He says, my wife is following all of your COVID stuff. He already had thought of it himself when his wife was telling him what I was doing. So, but notwithstanding, they still tried. Someone on a golf course or someone in a private meeting nodded to the revenue senior person, I would guess, and said, that guy's a problem for us. Do what you can. All verbal, no written communication, of course, I would say. And I got it. They did a completely fraudulent BS seizure notice. I got the letter telling me, and there was red seizure like stuff stamped on it. Crazy stuff. I got the letter on Thursday. I think it came in the post on Wednesday. I think I opened it on Thursday, my accountant similarly, and it had given me 7 days notice, not business days, 7 calendar days. And I realized that the following day, the time was up, but I'd only just got the letter. Next morning, the bailiff appeared at the door, physically. What? Unheard of. Never happened. My accountancy firm, they have a few hundred clients. He's been 30 years in this, right? Never had seen anything like it in his whole career. And he said, I would know if it happened. Yeah. So what they did was they applied a rule that it was 6 months late with the corporate tax. But my accountant had already got an agreement under the COVID rules because of his workload and staff, nothing to do with me. He had identified 15 or 20 he might not get to. They approved of that in writing. And in March of that year, he had asked them, guys, can you send me back the proper amount, like without the fine? Because we agreed I have a dispensation, legitimate, and did not get a reply. And then kind of forgot about it and got a reply on, let's say, July 10th saying, oh, yeah, here's the bill, the figure without the fine. But 2 days before, another department had intervened and sent the sheriff a warrant. Completely corrupt. I mean, I'll allow for possibilities of coincidences, but I kind of described what happened. That was governmental institutional corruption and harassment. I wrote immediately to the sheriff's department. I talked to the bailiff. He knew straight away there was something seriously wrong when he was talking to me. I said, I have those funds. I can do a transfer right now. Right now. But I said, I need to talk to my accountant. And the bailiff said, well, you know, it is technically with you, even though your accountant does all your stuff, it's legally with you. And I said, oh, I understand. But you have to deal with me, I believe, in a reasonable manner. And he said, oh, absolutely. And I said, so I think it's reasonable we talk to my accountant. He said, oh, of course. So he gave me a few days to bring in my accountant. And it was all sorted out, all cancelled. But that's the kind of scum we're dealing with. And I don't use that word too commonly. That is scum. And if anyone who is involved listens to it, I'm an upstanding family man, never done a wrong thing in my life, bar a parking fine, right? 5 kids, massive taxpayer my whole career, and still, right? And everything I've said has been true and honest and upstanding. And some scumbag did that. There you go.
Not even one. I bet several. Mate, I'm so sorry you had to go for that.
A few scummers.
Scummers.
Few
and
together.
I think that's what people don't realize. You're a family man. You got children. I'm a family man. I got 3 young kids, 8, 6, and 4. We're not loaded. We're not entitled. We've not won the lottery. And so when people say, oh, you know what, it's easy for you guys to do that, or you're grifters, or you're... No. I got no fucking money. I'm in a position where I'm actually... I don't know how I'm going to pay my tax at the end of the year. Because my income stream's dropped, and the I was paying overheads like the secretary and my indemnity and my room hire, but I had no funds coming in. So I'm in that position, and then and look what you've been through, look what I've been through, and then we get accused of being grifters and grafters and whatever. Off air, you were saying to me how little you earn on YouTube. I think people need to hear that. People think oh, you've got a big YouTube channel, you're absolutely raking it in. Can you just tell me what you just say again? What you said off air?
Oh yeah, depending on whether you get a really high volume video out, but usually not, because I of course in the algorithm are shadow banned. It's clear as crystal. There's no question of that. But a few hundred bucks in a month to it can be as high as 900s, maybe 1,000. But in euro, that's like, I don't know, 300 or 400 to 800 euro in a month. I mean, just like I used to earn, should I say it, as a manager in corporate, I earned like well north of 100K a year. And rightly so. I was always scoring the top of the employee performance ratings, and I got a lot of raises, and where a lot of people didn't. But that's gone now, back in 18. But the thing is, I subsist on various sources. Superb Patreon support, obviously much lower than back in the COVID, but still a group of great people who support my ongoing work to counter this madness. And then I've got some affiliates with nutraceuticals, Extend Life, and more recently Pure Gold, the Pure Gold company in the UK. I have a link there where you get a year's free storage, and they're great guys. Just came back from London interviewing their CEO. Fantastic, informed people. So I've got affiliates for stuff I believe in, but you've got these various income streams, and they kind of keep the family going. But this grifter idea is madness. The only thing I'd say is in the peak of COVID, when there was massive interest and I was doing a massively kind of leadership role in fairness, doing it. So I was working 7 days a week in COVID, round the clock, obsessively producing those PowerPoints and putting out those videos. And yeah, at that time, people were supporting me because they saw, my God, thank God there's someone putting out proper analytics, explaining it to ordinary people. So there was a period there where things were good, but I knew when COVID tails over, I'm back to realpolitik. And so that's why I got multiple things to keep rolling. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time. Like, I don't know about you, but before I was working 2.5, 3 days a week, right? And I did that because it's a long story, but I wanted to turn my health around. My dad, who was dying at the time, said, get your shit together. I reversed my diabetes. I lost a shitload of weight. I got fit, healthy. I'm younger, fitter, stronger now at 48 than at any point in my life. And I realized it was all about quality of life and getting time and sleeping and all that kind of stuff. And, I got off the rat race. All my colleagues, they're all fat, overweight, but driving the big G-Wagons and cars, and they got the big, massive mortgage and the big house. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that. Kids are all going to private school. I didn't want that. My kids go to state school. I've got an 8-year-old car, banged up. I don't give a shit. Okay. I've got my mortgage to pay off, and that's it. But now I'm working 7 days a week, mate. 7 days a week. If I'm not producing the videos, editing the videos, doing the artwork, doing the write-ups, doing the Substacks, doing the promotions, the shorts, chasing people out, contacting them, scheduling them, doing the research, it's day and night. It's
like no question. I mean,
sorry, you're saying?
Even Pure Gold as an example. I prepared the evening before. Then I had to fly to London, do the interview, grab lunch with Josh. Fantastic guy. It was actually delightful to meet him. So well informed. But then I worked on editing the video in the club where I met him. Then got back to Heathrow, got home, and then spent most of yesterday editing, preparing, and doing all the stuff on that, and then got it out. So that's 2 days gone, just one interview. People watch an interview on YouTube and they think, just throw a camera up. Bullshit. But there's huge work in all of this, and everything you mentioned as well. I mean, there's no question. One quick thing I'll mention, though, that on a positive note, I don't have super rich, semi or almost famous people giving me money. However, when I was put in the Belfast Telegraph with an absolute fraudulent article accusing me of being in some perverse way connected to the death of a councillor, a poor man who died with he had an autoimmune disease, he had other issues, he was against the vaccine, and they actually mined my Twitter and found out he followed me and sent me a tweet once. And they made a whole story out of it because he happened to die, sadly. And it was outrageous. And a hedge fund manager retired, basically in our group, wrote to me and said, Ivor, I'm not sure the chances of legally winning because the judges are not on your side either. But he said, if you want to pursue them, I'll bankroll it. He was going to bankroll a legal kind of libel thing against the paper. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's lots more people. I won't mention their names, household names, some of them. Again, they don't give me anything because even when asked, I say, I'm running a business and I'm getting by. I don't want charity. But likewise, if I ever had more of this nonsense with the revenue, I know I'd just reach out, even independent of a GoFundMe, and I get the support. So it'd be good that they know that too, right? Yeah.
Well, put them in touch with me then. Tell them to help me out.
The problem with these kinds of things is it's like your brand or whatever. They are very personally connected to me. Like, one of them's a very famous, world famous person. But he said, Ivor, you saved my life with your work during COVID in 2020. Contacted me, spent an hour on the phone. I'm talking about a guy, I won't mention his name. Pretty much even my kids of 15, even though he's nearly 80, went, wow, that famous. So they're the kind of things, but as it happens, they're not just generally supporting people who fight.
But dude,
it's this personal bond they feel.
But you're in that category of Secret Back Day, yourself, Thomas Binder. Remember Thomas Binder? that Swiss guy that got
Thomas
locked
Binder
up.
in Germany. They put him in an asylum, I think.
Yeah, Switzerland. They put him in an asylum. They put him in an asylum.
They put him in an asylum, and unless he took the tablets, the drugs, they wouldn't let him out.
Yeah. So I
told people that they said that's impossible.
No, it happened in Switzerland. I mean, of all places, you think, Swiss people, nice, chocolate, cows, milk, all that. No, Switzerland, they put him in an asylum.
Home of Davos. Home of Davos. But Switzerland were quite good in lockdowns and stuff, because even though they're the home of Davos, they're broken up government, it's more like states rather than federal government. They got principalities, and that brought in diversity, and it allowed some of those principalities to kind of be little Swedens, and it stopped the country going insane. But yeah.
So Mike Eden, Thomas Binder, Secret Bhakti, yourself. I mean, you guys were right from the day dot championing and saying the right things, saying there was no pandemic, saying no. Even now there's people in the freedom movement talking about early treatment and pandemic. And I get really upset. There's no pandemic and there was no need for early treatment. I mean, just take your vitamin C, your vitamin D and your zinc and you're fine. It's that simple. But I think a lot of people have put their energy into early treatment, made a name for themselves, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, you name it, supplements, all that kind of stuff. But I think willingly or unwillingly, they're playing into the hands of the sinister bastards. Yes. There was no pandemic. Stop banging on about it.
That is a superb point, and I felt it for a long time now. Guys, you're talking about yesterday's war, and you're only adding to the effectiveness perversely. And it was someone who said, not Nietzsche, Solzhenitsyn. He said the only thing an honest man has to do is to not partake in the lie. And there's an element of partaking in the lie. Now, people say to me, Ivor, there are no viruses. You're organized opposition. I'm not going there. And I actually told them. I get that. Yeah. I actually thought about this in case it could be used against me by my enemies, because I think about everything. I'm like a shark with that stuff. Should I say this honestly or not? And I weighed it up. I projected into the future, all the contingencies. I said, no, I can say this. And I did on Twitter until I got sick of them. I said to them, guys, I'll level with you. I'll be honest. When I was young, I was fascinated with viruses. Now, that's 40 years ago plus. So I know the bad guys were not active back then. So obviously there's this mass stupidity back then, even when there was no coercion. Okay, that's the first thing. I was fascinated by them. I did them in college as well. They are quasi-life because they don't respirate. They do reproduce and they do tick the boxes of life, but they're quasi because they don't respirate. They don't metabolize. They use a host. I knew I was into that stuff 40 years ago, right? Come on. And the other thing I said is I'm not going to spend time in this, because the key thing is, if I go in and watch all these doctors, and if I come to the conclusion, honestly, that there are actually no viruses, if that happens, I will not speak word of it. I will never say it. Because I'm fighting a war here, and I don't throw my troops into ambushes. I do not just throw my troops in to be all killed. And if I went out and said it, even if I knew it was true, I'd basically be giving up the war, and I'd be a non-combatant, and I'd disappear off the battlefield. That's not going to happen. I have 5 kids. Yeah.
Brother,
that's an important point.
We're on the same page. I freaking love you. I'm reaching over and hugging you right now, because I'm getting this bullshit day in, day out. And I don't know whether it's
5G.
I don't know if it's the enemy deliberately trying to trip me up. I'm just like you. Listen, I'm under no illusion They are watching everything I say and do, reading every Substack, watching every video. I've had the hospitals. I've done FOIA requests. I know they're taking screenshots of my Substacks. They've been pouring over my podcast.
Oh.
The enemy, and the reason why is, look, you have a scientific background, an analytical brain. You're intelligent, and you're calm, and you're got that lovely, sexy Irish voice. It puts everybody in a very relaxed state, and you're just reasonable and sensible. And anyone listening to you will not think you're a wacko jacko crazy person. I'll be like, this is interesting. I need to hear what this guy has to say. So you are, for that reason, a threat, because you are credible, because you are someone that someone will want to listen to. And the reason why I am a danger, and the reason why I've been cancelled and they've tried to destroy me, I've changed it. They haven't destroyed me. I'm going to come out stronger, by the way. But the reason why they've tried to destroy me is because I am a surgeon. I'm from the system. I'm credible. I've got a nice Glaswegian accent. Just we've got something about these accents. I'm a reasonable guy. Sometimes I'm a bit entertaining. I'm not too far out there crazy. Okay, and people want to listen to me. We are a threat to them, and that's a compliment. But that means we have to be super freaking careful. And so when someone says to me, you're talking about viruses, but I go, do you know what I say? I go, frack off. You know what? I'm dealing with shit much bigger right now. And I know what you're saying. If there's no viruses, then there's no pandemics and the whole thing's fine. Okay, listen, there's a bigger picture. We talked about the big picture. Stop focusing on one pin on the map. And if you're going to make me focus on that one pin on the map, which will take me off the map, I'm just not interested. And you either get it or you don't. And if you keep badgering, it means you're trying to trip me up, and I'm not interested. It's funny you should say this, by the way.
Yeah, and that is an interesting question on whether they are bad people trying to make fools of the good people, or whether they're just deluded, or let's allow the possibility. To be fair, I have not researched it enough to say unequivocally. I'm open to it. That in some sense.
I'm open to it.
Yeah, even if it's the latter, no matter what they are, they must be avoided at all costs. Because even if they're the latter, and even if they're correct, to my earlier point, it is literally a nuclear weapon, thermonuclear weapon in our camp that will destroy everyone who says it. You will never sell that one. I know it. I'm a corporate guy. I was involved in corporate politics and shenanigans for nearly 30 years. I know that is a road to instant failure. It's sad if there are no viruses that's the case, that we can't speak truth. But we have to be realists. It's Harry Carey. You're over. You're gone. And in terms of the media, reasonableness, I had to stay reasonable. I had to stay measured. I heard from someone who is connected to Google that says they even have algorithms that if someone is clearly like fighty and talking in a wild-eyed way about certain topics, they'll pick up on the tone and further shadow ban because it's conspiracy theory. They even have that advanced. But besides all that, in Ireland, the media actually allowed me on in the summer. I got in the Irish Business Post, a business newspaper of record. They did a big article, and although they criticized me and they brought in the experts who are utter idiots, as I knew, utter idiots, I gave them a PDF of all of my responses on what they talked to me on the phone. And I said, this PDF is the record of what I'm saying. We are agreed on that, right? So I was very careful in advance, like with tax, clean as a whistle. And they honored it. And one of the most important things I had to say was that I am absolutely up for debate and encourage open debate on this matter. We're missing that. And they printed it in the body of the article, in fairness to them, and they chose it as the quote from me on the big picture. They sent a photographer here to my house. They put it as the chosen quote. So some people read it and said, that's a hit job. And I said, guys, you don't know what a hit job is. That's actually not that bad. And I've gone back to it since. But after that, the media as an organism realized that guy is too smart, too reasonable, and too convincing.
Yes.
And what's more, we as media cannot contradict in a discussion a single thing that he says, and we know it. Therefore, the policy has to be, unspoken or spoken, just keep him off the media at all costs. That's the strategy. And that
100%.
happened until a Western regional radio had me on, Limerick FM. So many people lobbied him. He had me on and I said, look, there's a lot of censorship and ways I'm surprised I'm on here, but it's great. I love openness. And he said, oh, no, there's no censorship. What do you mean? And I told him, well, the CEO of YouTube in March 2020 said, if you say anything that contradicts the WHO, you're gone. So that's the tip of the iceberg. And he said, oh, is that for real? No one even knew that. And I said, that's for real. Public statement. Okay, fair enough. Well, not here. Okay, good. Great conversation. 8-minute slot, went to 18 minutes. It was a tour de force, if I say so myself. Really careful I was. It was really beautiful. And your man at the end was clearly saying they are very good points. And he hit me with all the ones. But Ivor, people have died and suffered in great amounts. Would you not acknowledge blah, blah, blah? And I said, of course they have. And it's very sad. But a severe flu season is not a mile off that. You know, we need to keep things in perspective. And the median age is 82. Old people are, of course, important too. But we have to just keep things in perspective. And he acknowledged my point. So that was the last media appearance I had because they got a flood of callers saying the first person I've heard talking sense on COVID in a year. Flood of those comments.
Well done.
That I never got media again in Ireland. But it's just a story of the Media Act. They have their immune systems. They know that they are told what to say. They accept it, or you lose your job or you don't get a promotion. And when a problem comes up that's making you clearly look terrible, you just organize together to make sure that that person doesn't get reach.
100%.
That's it.
It's the same in medicine, mate. It's the same in medicine. The doctors are doing the exact same. They're not speaking out. They know. You know, I think there's a mixture of doctors are either indoctrinated in the system and just buying every single bullshit and they actually believe it, right? Or they're deliberately shilling. They're getting paid. They've got big media profiles. They're getting big Instagram profiles. They get promoted upwards, so they know, and they're agents. Yeah. Or you've got people who know it's wrong but are too scared to say anything because they know what's going to happen. And Ahmed Malik's going to happen. You're going to become an Andrew Wakefield. You're going to become a David Cartland. So you know what? You're like, I can't afford to lose it all. So you know what? I'll just stay quiet. I'll look the other way. And the problem is, evil happens when good people do nothing about it. You know, evil flourishes when good people just don't do anything about it. And that's the problem that we're facing. But listen, you mentioned Rockefellers. Who you didn't mention was the Rothschilds. Where do they fit into this?
You've just brought up the perennial. Comes up all the time in my talks, public talks last year in Dublin and Amsterdam.
Sorry for being predictable.
No. No, it's not because nothing. This one is the first one where I say that because it's come up so many times. And it's come up so many times because a lot of people are angry about it. And they angrily, even though they're on my side, asked with the microphone while I was on stage in Amsterdam, in Dublin, and in England, Southampton, and wherever I go and I tell the Rockefeller story, you get some people in the audience who are quite angry because I didn't even mention the Rothschilds. And there's a simple reason. Nordengard and me likewise will only cover stuff that's controversial when it's fully documented and published and clear as crystal. Stuff we know about, like the enormous hyper wealth of the Rothschilds and I think the Wagner families who were all involved in World War II and I. All of that stuff is there. And yes, they're vastly wealthier than the Rockefellers. And yes, they are sitting at some kind of gilded table up in the sky. And they have their fingers and their banking interests in all of these matters. That's true. However, I will not say that on the record because I can't prove it. And I don't have documentation. And Nordengard said the same thing. He did a PhD and he's sticking to the standard of a PhD.
Like it.
Full stop. He's never going to give the enemy a chance to say, well, he said something and that's debunked. And he can't come back at them because, well, it's true. He doesn't have proof. That's the reason. That's the reason.
Well, no, I'm happy with that. That's a great answer. And that's what I want to do. I want to stick to facts and stick to what I know. And that's why, you know, I'm not going to mention, there's another podcaster out there. And I used to listen to him quite a lot. I've stopped listening to him because just like...
I think I know who.
It's just like the real issues, the medical ethics, the banking, the violation of justice and the rule of law and the bigger picture that we're seeing are so obvious that we can talk about, you know, talking about whether Paul McCartney is real or not. Who gives a shit? Like, you know, talking about whether dinosaurs are real or not. Like, seriously? Just what the frack?
Who cares?
Man? Who gives a shit? You know, let's talk about stuff that we can talk about, that's real, that's credible. And you're either gone crazy or you're working for the other side talking about stuff like this, because any sane, rational person listening to it will be like, what's this crazy person talking about? Like, what the heck? And the thing is, look, it's very simple. The enemy has an agenda. We've got an agenda. We need to get as many of our friends and family and loved ones and work colleagues awake to what's going on. Because when you get to that critical...
What's going on, and that's published.
That's published. That's not debatable. That is fact. It's not your truth. It's not my truth. It's the truth. It's there. Yes. Right? I don't believe in this my truth business. Hey, Ivor, can you tell me about my truth? No. I'll tell you about the truth.
That's it. Has to be objective. And you know, Nordengard's talk, and you probably put a link after down below, or I also will if I share this.
Yes.
40 minutes. I find it personally, and vast majority who watch it find it very entertaining, easy to watch. At the end of 40 minutes of 100% bona fide published material in Rockefeller archives, UN documents, a story 100% published. If you watch that with an open mind, at the end, you'll never fall for any of the nonsense again, and you'll start just peeling away from the main media. Because you will see with no question where all of these things are coming from. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. And every article in the paper you read about climate and about this, that, and the other, immediately in your head, you'll go, yeah, that comes from Rockefeller, the bad guys. It may be true. It may be a bit of a threat. It may be a tiny threat. It may be no threat, the climate. It's actually it's a meaningless threat. It's made up largely. There's some scientific truth in it, like CO2 warming effect. It has no real world meaning. But no matter what it is, if you know it came with no question from Rockefeller Brothers Fund right through the CFR, the UN, Kissinger, Schwab, WEF, I could go on all day, Club of Rome, all the organizations. Once you know it came from there, and you know the four things they identified 3/4 of a century ago as opportunities, you're inoculated. You should never be thinking about 5G or flat Earth or any of that stuff. You don't need to. Sorry, I had to say that again.
No, I love it. I'm so glad you did. And you know what? It's funny when you said that opportunities. I've seen that. I've got visual memory. I remember reading that. I remember reading about, and the funny thing is, I just want to throw it in there. Initially, they were talking about, we need to talk about global cooling. And that was what they were going to talk about, global cooling. And then they're like, oh shit, no, actually, no.
Changed.
Then they changed it to global warming. It's like the whole thing is
because it was getting a bit warmer.
So they're like, oh shit.
They just said, oh shit, it's getting warmer. We don't know what's going on here. We're just making stuff up. But if the planet and nature is getting warmer, we better pretend that warming is the problem.
I know.
That's it.
Right. I mean, it's so
and
mad.
One last thing. The Club of Rome. Oh, it's so bad. The Club of Rome, I think in 91, it was part of the kind of Broken Earth. And I forget the exact name of the initiative, but it was huge. I think Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands led it up, and all the Rockefeller stooges and big heads in the UN, Maurice Strong, Club of Rome, UN Environment Head, all Rockefeller stooges did this huge thing which got a lot of traction on climate. And it was the Stockholm conference was the similar time. All of these lies were being institutionalized. And the Club of Rome produced a document that was very influential. In the document, in their own words, there's a quote that most people would find hard to believe they said this, but they did. That's what I mean about published. They basically said, I'll paraphrase it, but it's pretty accurate. In searching for something that we could use that would fulfill our needs for an enemy, right? Because the Soviet Union had just fallen and they needed a unifying enemy, like a ploy. We realized that climate change and climate disaster would fit the bill. Their exact words, would fit the bill.
Wow.
Now, how many people, if they knew that a super rich organization, Club of Rome, affiliated to everyone who's anyone at high elite levels around the world, and Davos and Bilderberg and Rockefellers and all that their primary climate vehicle influencing the world on climate disaster actually said themselves that when looking for a common enemy, we realized that climate disaster would fit the bill.
Wow.
And at the end, they say, in short, the enemy is humanity itself. That was also in the same paragraph. Now, anyone who read that and knew it was true, and it is true because it's published, and had a vague idea of Nordengerd's story, the Rockefeller, and the geopolitical history, I would say, unless they're an idiot, would have to realize at that moment that it's a scam. Without even getting into the science and the physics. You don't need to.
I know, but you know what the problem is? There's so many good people, Ivor, who are totally brainwashed. They've watched they watch David Attenborough, they watch the BBC, they read The Guardian. They think Tories are bad, but Labour and Lib Democrats are the winners and the good guys. And you know what? There's too many people on the planet. The problem is there's too many people. If we just got rid of people, you know what? All the problems would go away. Climate change would go away. The environment would get better. Polar bears would thrive. And you know what? We'd all sing Kumbaya. And I'm like, whoa. And I know people in my family like this, church-going people who think like this. And I'm like, listen, I know you're a good person, but what you're saying fundamentally is anti-human and the most ungodly thing you could say. Okay? Because we are made in God's, you know, whatever. In God's
image or whatever,
image, that's it.
Well, and even outside of that, the 8 billion people, if everyone had a meter squared and you put them together, I think it's 1,000 square kilometers or something. Anyway, it's less than the size of Texas. That's the whole planet.
Yeah.
Less than a fraction of Texas. You could put them standing. Now, give them a bigger space, a small holding each, they'll still all fit in a tiny fraction. But the whole thing is just.
I said this. The problem isn't. The problem isn't that there's too many people. The problem is there's few people who are desperately wanting more and more power and control over all of us. It's that minority of people that are the problem, not the majority. The funny thing is, the minority of people have convinced the majority of people that the majority of problems are their fault and not, in fact, the minority. The minority have created the majority of problems that we face today, but they've hoodwinked us into thinking it's our fault. You know what? Ivor, you need to stop going on a plane on holiday. You need to stop driving your car. You need to sit in your little ghetto. You need to stop eating meat so that I can go on my jet to Davos and wherever I want and live in a territory the size of Brussels and laugh at you while I eat my steak. You just stay plugged in your little condo, watching porn or Netflix and eating gloop, right? And then you will save the planet while I fracking enjoy the peace and quiet.
Yeah, and that's perfect because, not to repeat, but exactly what you said, straight back to the Club of Rome, the most powerful, influential organization creating hysteria for their political reasons, power reasons. They said, when searching for a ruse, right, climate disaster would fit the bill, we realized. And the enemy is now humanity itself. So they basically had the perfect ruse. We'll actually get all these ants, and to get a total ant farm that will lord it over with caviar cigars and the finest of meats, we'll actually flip it on them and tell them all that stuff you can't have anymore, and it's your fault, ant. And if we own the media and we spend a half century preparing, which they have, the people who started all of this madness off are all dead. Just think about that. The average person doesn't think beyond their breakfast. These people start such huge undertakings that they know they'll be dead long before they come to fruition, and that's fine. They are the ultimate long gamers. My corporate mate I mentioned earlier, he shook his head, and we used to be long gamers. We'd put in a program maybe of several hundred million, and for the first 2 years you'd be net negative, and then a year, 2.5 maybe, you'd strike even. And then you'd make a load of money on the aftermarket sales of supplies for those products. But we were long gamers. Most people go, oh my God, like the next 2 or 3 years cash flow is going to be negative. No. Long game. And we made a fortune. These, he said to me, Christ, and we thought we were long gamers. These guys are long gamers. And the man in the street, the woman in the street can't understand that, because their lives are just working day to day. That's a challenge.
Dude, it is a challenge. And because of what happened to me, I feel that. Like, I'm worried about where I'm going to pay the bills next month. I'm worried about this. I'm stressing about how I'm going to put food on the table for my family and kids. And that's what majority of people are like in this world. You know, they're thinking a week ahead. These people are generational thinkers. They're thinking their generations. And it's, in some respects, they're just a completely different species from the rest of us. Anyway, listen, we need to wrap up.
Dynasties.
They're dynasties. I want to ask you something. For your average person listening, how do you protect yourself in this world today and from the future? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you do what I do, not because I'm right and everything, even though I humorously am, but what I do is a good example, because I'm very exposed to the evil, like I told the story about the bailiff, so that you don't need to go this far. I make sure everything I do is squeaky clean. I often say to people that even your own brother or even your mother can never truly say you're clean, your whole history clean, no illegality, no skeletons. Only you can know that. I'm in the lucky position where I know I'm 100% clean. So I know there's nothing there for anyone to find, unless they frame me. But getting into that level of crime, I'm not big enough for that. So make sure you're clean, or at least clean from now on. Tax. I mentioned the story. Make sure you're absolutely clean on tax. I have made sure of that my whole life, on a point of principle, but from around 5 or 6 years ago with a management accountancy firm, ultra clean. Don't talk about stuff that's not fully published and absolutely defensible and published, like to our point we said earlier. You will expose yourself to being perceived as a conspiracy theorist. If you're going to lead with the right information that's fully published, fully defensible. And I say to people, there's plenty of mainstream articles out there saying lockdowns did not work. There's plenty of mainstream articles saying Wuhan was probably the source. Use those. Don't use Facebook shit. You'll only discredit yourself for no benefit. The other thing I think is I'm more and more interviewing financial people. And a few years ago, I learned for the first time from some of the doctors in our network, some of the smartest guys I've ever met, that they were all holding some physical gold for 15 years. They were ahead of the game. So I moved some of my corporate pension, which is very minor or measly. I think my corporate pension, after 30 years nearly, at management level for 15 of those, and master technologist, at the end of the day, for the standard defined contribution pension, my pension, I think, is worth around a quarter of a generic nurse in Ireland working in the public service, because they're defined benefit. So it's a small pension, but I took a good chunk of that and got it made into physical bullion. because I don't have much cash, but I had a pension and some redundancy money. I did the same. So I think that is a hedge. It's not to speculate and make loads of money, but it's a very good hedge to counter potential issues that may be coming with CBDC and potentially pretty huge crashes in the financial system. Possibly a potential crash in the derivatives market, which is around $2 quadrillion now. There's all these potential headwinds, and I think ownership of physical gold, and I do have a link to it, or you may have a link shortly, to one of the best companies that I've come across, Pure Gold company in the UK, and I interviewed them the other day. But beyond that, I mean, it's being upstanding yourself in your own life. And as Solzhenitsyn said, we'll finish with that. The only thing an honest man, or whatever he said, needs to do is to refuse to partake in the lie. And if we had enough people doing that, the thing would lose steam, I think.
Yeah, I love it. Can I suggest something to save you time and me? So we were meant to, you were meant to come on my show, and then I was meant to come on your show. Why don't we just share
Let's
this?
just release.
Just you put it on YouTube and I'll put it on mine, and that's it. Just done. Like, because we both chatted. It's a conversation. It was a mutual exchange of ideas. It wasn't I interviewing you and you interviewing me. And like, we just had a chat, man. Let's just, we'll just have the same chat again.
You know what? It'd be hard to even figure how we do it with a different slant and which version would go on which platform. No, you're right. It was roughly 50-50. I mean, I'm a bit of a ranter. You got me in the morning. I had a great night's sleep. First in a few days after traveling. I do OMAD. I eat one meal a day. So all day long, I'm like a jackrabbit because my stomach's completely empty.
Me too.
Yeah. And your mental acuity, you know, so... It was so good, energetic, and I think we covered a load of really important stuff. I think it was a great chat, Ahmed.
Frackload,
yeah, let's just put it on our platforms.
Frackload. But there's one thing I missed that. Like, there's a signature question, please. You're in your hundreds. You've lived a long life. You've done OMAD. You eat meat. You're freaking you look great. But look, you're now on your deathbed. You're going to meet your maker, and before you pass on, what advice are you going to give to your loved ones, health or otherwise?
Oh, yeah, I think I've talked so much about health and the family all know about it, but the only advice would be to stick to the true science that we know, and that will deliver you such a bounty, because it's not just, Joe, you lose some weight, you look better. Yeah, there's that. That's a lot of people like that. But there's mental acuity, there's productivity, there's life success based on your energy levels. It goes on and on and on, and you get quality adjusted life years, you get health span. So not just do you probably give yourself 10 or 12 more years, they're not 10 or 12 years like dribbling in a nursing home. The likelihood is you'll get 10 or 12 more years, but your next 30 or 40 will all be better. And add it all up, and you'll probably just go out quickly at the end, much more likely than the long, slow diabetic disaster or stuff. So that would be the health advice. And the general advice is, just be principled. And I would say this is the last thing. Look up Stoicism, research it, get deep into it, and live it. Because my philosophy, more than any other, is Stoicism. And it is so beautiful. It does not mean you just say, oh, well, I'll do nothing. It's not nihilism, and it's not apathy. Stoicism is absolutely doing everything you can for the good of the world and the good of the people and the good of yourself and to counter bad guys. You do all that, but you never worry about the outcome, because that's pointless. The outcome will be what it is. It's fate. You just do. What's your legacy? I countered it as well as I could. The final thing I will say, Ahmed, the final thing is, all I want after this, even if we're all ending up in a gulag, doesn't matter in some ways. All I want is to look back and say, I did what I could to prevent this bad outcome for me and my children. And that will bring me peace.
Amen. I freaking love it. The purpose of life is happiness, which is achieved by virtue, living according to the dictates of reason, ethical and philosophical training, self-reflection, careful judgments, and inner calm. Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism.
Beautiful. That is the creed, man.
That's the creed. And you know what? I want to pass on something to you. So I spoke to Ed Griffin on the podcast, the guy who wrote the book Creature Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said to me, Ahmed, you, like me, have the Crusader gene. I would like to pass that baton on to you. Ivor, you have the Crusader gene. You're a good man. Listen.
You and I both, Ahmed. Great stuff. Great way to end it.
Everyone, I hope you enjoyed it. This
too.
is both from me and Ivor. I love you guys all. Bye-bye.
So there you go. A big one, eh? And please do follow Ahmed Malik, Dr. Malik, on his various platforms. I'll put a link down below to his main website. And of course, the links are down below if you want that free financial consultation with the guys at the Pure Gold Company, and a link as well for free storage for a year while you decide where you're going to put it, because most people will want to physically have the asset. So that's it, folks. Until next time, thank you.